Hey, how are you? Good to see you. Happy holidays. We're doing something a little new. I haven't made a tutorial in a while, so I thought, hey, why not make a tutorial? Yep, that's, well, a guide, a tutorial, a educational piece of footage. I thought I'd start doing some educational stuff once in a while because I feel like doing it and I think it's fun. I'm going to show you how to make a quick little wardrobe, a barrel, and then a chair. The most common props you would ever find on YouTube. You know, the barrel being probably the most common one. And most people would probably be like, start with a chair when you're learning Blender or 3D modeling. So I thought, hey, why not? Let's just make a chair. So it's going to be a fun little video. You're going to learn a few things, maybe, or maybe you'll, degenerate and learn less. Now, here's the process. We're not going to be using Substance Painter. We are going to use reusable textures and materials, which you would do typically in a game asset workflow. Anyways, you want to try to minimize the amount of unique textures if possible. So objects like these, you could tell they're pretty consistent. They all use wood. They have wood fibers going along it. Maybe different types of wood, different type of color wood. We're gonna stick with one color wood for this one. I don't know, maybe some sort of like oak or something. Maybe like a desaturated wood, kind of like this or something. But we're gonna stick with that, so you kind of know what we're gonna be doing. All right, so let's start with modeling. We're gonna go straight into modeling first. Once we're done that, we're gonna go into UVing, and honestly, UVing for my workflow when it comes to these kind of textures or these kind of models is super quick, which might help a few people. I might do a little bit of manual work here and there. I can tell by some of the cylindrical objects here. I might have to do a few seams, but it's honestly, these objects are super simple. They're nothing too crazy. So if you're new to Blender, I would say this isn't exactly like, oh, here's how you make a cube and then you extrude the cube. Like maybe you learn a few things, but it's not going to be exactly like a UI interface tutorial. If that's what you're looking for, you're in the wrong place, buddy. You got to go somewhere else. But this should help you nonetheless if you're trying to figure out the workflow in terms of like, what part do I do? We're going to get straight into it. We're going to start modeling these things. We're going to do a block out first so that we have the general shapes and also the sizes. I got my trusty old UE4 mannequin here. I would recommend you get yourself a human scale or a scale for your game or whatever. Very, very helpful. This dude's like 6'7", I think, or 6'3", about my height. Also, for those that are wondering, this program here is called PureRef. I highly recommend grabbing it. I'll put a link down to it down below. All right, so I got a quick little scale for the wardrobe over here. That's it. It's a cube. You can tell it's almost like I'm building an IKEA wardrobe. I feel like I'm at IKEA right now. I just unboxed my furniture and I'm building it right in front of your eyes. Something I'm going to do, I always like to do this with my models because sometimes these scales are inconsistent and usually you want to zero these out because it could cause a lot of issues. For example, if you look at this one, it's 0.019. Once you start getting into things like beveling and whatnot, this actually, these values here can screw up your bevel because it does utilize the scale. So what I like to do is I like to select everything, do Control A, rotation and scale, and that kind of resets everything. That way it's a nice clean slate, doesn't cause any issues. If I were to go in here and start beveling things, it's not going to be all screwed up. And there we go. We have the beginnings of our wardrobe. We just need some handles. And honestly, this object's pretty good to go. I think if anything, the next few things would be adding in some bevels and whatnot, but we're going to cover that later once we're done with some of the other objects. So let's quickly make these handles and then move on to the next thing. That is our wardrobe. It looks pretty good. We're going to bevel it later, but for now, we're going to move on to the next object, which is the barrel. Yeah, the barrel. Yeah, this is... It's gonna be easy. This is gonna be an easy one. If anything, we might add some details for these little metal parts so that it kind of actually looks like they're attached in some way. Generally, a good rule of thumb is to do little details like that, in my opinion, because then it kind of gives the model a little bit more life. When you rotate it and randomize it, people will see these in different spots. So it looks a lot cooler. But let's get to it. We're gonna quickly just slap a cylinder and scale it up a little bit, and that's it. That's the whole model. All right, here is the beginnings of our barrel. I just did a bunch of bevels and stuff like that. Kind of got the beginnings of this. Very easy to do this. I scaled it up a bunch, fattened it up a bunch and beveled, and then set clamps. That way it goes up to the top, and then I merged everything. All we need to do now is kind of just inset these, these two spots here. Extrude, merge, collapse. And that is it. The rest is metal. Look at that. We already have some metal. It's looking pretty good. And then the wood, of course, what we're gonna have to do with the wood to really make it seem like they're different planks is we are going to essentially grab all of these edges, or alternatively, we can just grab one section here and then go on ahead and do a little beveling. A tiny little bevel that'll make it look like it's an actual separate barrel piece. Of course, in reality, I would probably texture this in Substance Painter, but if you're tight on budget, this is probably the best thing to do is to just add the details through bevels and whatnot. But yeah, that's the process. You technically don't need to add bevels. You technically don't need to. What you could do is just select each one of these, and you're gonna, when you're in the UV stage, you're gonna kind of move them along the wood fibers on the Z-axis, or whichever direction the wood fibers are going. You're going in the other direction. That way you can kind of randomize where these are, because these are technically different pieces of wood kind of put together. Now, of course, for our little method, we're probably gonna be missing out on little details like this, these kind of darkened spots and whatnot that are consistent throughout the whole thing. This little damage, you can add this damage through some sort of like vertex painting and stuff like that. So you can definitely make it so you have these details while still, you know, using the same textures, which I would definitely recommend, because then you can reuse that material throughout your entire game and you end up saving a lot on, you know, memory and stuff like that. But let's go on ahead and finish up this metal and kind of go from there. We're not going to add any bevels yet. We're just going to kind of focus on these little clamp sections, maybe add some screws in, and that'll look pretty cool. If anything, I might also separate these wood panel pieces and add some very, very slight bevels to it. We're going to separate these top and bottom, because we're essentially treating this as its own piece of wood. We're going to separate that. We're going to grab one edge loop. And we can do that by holding Alt and then right clicking or left clicking, whichever button you have. And now we have one of its own things. From here, we can inverse the selection and delete the rest. Now, something very important. You need to make sure that you remember your edge loops, or how many faces you had around. If you don't remember it, you can go back to your model here before deleting it. And then we can count that we have 20 faces. So that means this is a 20-sided cylinder. Let's go on ahead and delete this. And now, Control A, so we clear all that. And we're gonna do Shift S, cursor to selected. That way we have it right here. And we are going to hit spacebar and add an empty. This is basically going to control our entire array. Now, we're gonna do some math. I know you probably hate this. Don't click off yet, it's very easy, okay? We're gonna do 360 divided by 20, 18. That means we're going to rotate this by 18 degrees. That's it. It's as easy as that. So from here, we're going to do an array. Relative offset, we're going to turn that off. We're going to go to object offset, and we're going to select the empty. And you can see that it perfectly aligns. Now we set this count to 19. Look at that. There's one piece left over. 20. There you go. That's it. So now from here, what we can do is we can easily just bevel this part here, and this thing is going to look absolutely beautiful. So what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to, I think, add a face in here temporarily, and I'm going to bevel this piece ever so slightly. This also means you could probably add some damage and stuff around the entire barrel if you wanted to on each little wooden board piece, and that way that adds even more randomization throughout this whole thing. Highly recommend doing that if you really want to go even further with this prop. But for now, you take a look at that. That looks pretty good. That already adds a nice bit of oomph, you know what I mean? So I'm gonna call that basically nearly done. We just have to do the final detail, these little clamp sections on the metal. All right, there we have it. We have our little piece there. Of course, we are gonna bevel it really quickly. All right, so now that we finished that, because of how long that took, I might go ahead and take these pieces and reuse them as well for these middle sections. And what we're gonna do is, I'm not gonna keep this exactly aligned, even though in the reference I can tell that they are all aligned. I don't know if there's an actual mechanical reasoning for that, but I think just for the purposes of us not having too much repetition here, I kind of want to move these and offset them a little bit. That way it looks a little bit more human, you know, not perfect, because perfect is kind of, perfect sucks. It looks like shit. All right, so it's chair time. The one model that you probably were recommended to make when you first started modeling. Or a donut, which is a trap. Don't make a donut. Trust me. Do not make a donut. We're gonna make the chair. Let's get to it. First, I'm gonna clear up my cursor location. To do that, we're gonna go to View, down to 3D Cursor. We can select all of these and set it to 0. That way we have a clean slate. We're not gonna screw up and add this cube somewhere we don't want it. And we're gonna move this all the way to the right. It's gonna look nice and pretty. All right, so I'm starting with the part your butt goes on, because this kind of gives me a bit of an idea in terms of scale. I'm lining it up to his knees, and kind of doing all this. This will give us a bit of a better idea in terms of how the shape of this is going to go, right? Look at this. Look, I'm building a chair. It's literally just a bunch of cubes. It should be pretty straightforward. Nothing too complicated. One thing I will do, though, is I'm actually going to go on ahead and delete one side of this part, because what we're going to do, I think this is usually pretty normal on chairs. We're going to add some edge loops here and cut out the section where the leg goes through. And I believe this is something that is usually on chairs, where it's a run through for the these kind of pieces here. I don't know, any chair experts in the comments can let me know. Otherwise, this should look pretty cool once we bevel it. It'll look really nice and clean. So we're just gonna slap that detail in. The last piece we need to do is these little backrests. So I'm just gonna duplicate these cubes and move them around. That's all we're doing, really. We're just slapping in a bunch of cubes. That's it. That's all there is to it. All right, there we go. There's our chair. I might have made it a little too tall, but we could say this is like a king's chair. Actually, I'm actually gonna change that. It looks awful. All right, there we go. Now, what normal me would do if I'm really being picky about the sizing of this chair is I would actually take my character and rotate the bones or all of the mesh so that way he's in a sitting position. I definitely recommend you do that if you really wanted to kind of be very specific, and that way it gives you a bit more of a reference in terms of how your character is actually going to sit on this and stuff like that, and gives you a bit of a better idea. Of course, depending on the game, sometimes you are going to exaggerate shapes, sizes, all that kind of stuff. You're sometimes going to exaggerate it because you kind of need to make it look a lot better. So I recommend playing around with that, playing around with your characters and some of your references. But we generally have everything we want done and out of the way. It's looking pretty nice. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to add some more bevels to these pieces, these wood pieces, because it's a very low poly. It doesn't really matter too much. We're going to add some bevels, and then we're going to add weighted normals. And if you don't know what those are, ooh, you're in for a treat. All right, so I'm going to add a very basic level of bevel to this. Nothing too crazy enough to see it. And then we're going to do shade smoothing. And wow, this looks really ugly. But if we go on ahead to the object data properties and we set the normals to auto smooth and set it to 180, we can then add another modifier called weighted normal. Now, I don't know how this thing works. It's like magic, but it essentially will make it will use the bevels almost like they're control loops, I guess, in terms of weighting the normals. That way it still looks really nice while still having bevels, and of course we can disable it and enable it whenever we want to, and that's pretty cool. Essentially, we're at the stage where we are adding smoothing to all of our objects, and we're going to essentially do all of this for all of them, and then we're going to quickly UV unwrap them, and that's basically it. It's a very, very easy, quick workflow. Of course, the video is a lot longer than I would want it, but you know, modeling something isn't it's not something that's like, you know, like you can only go as fast as possible, especially when you're texturing it and stuff. And like, obviously people are going to see these objects. So, you know, it takes a little bit of time, even if it's a very fast workflow. But This only took me about a day for 3 objects, and sometimes it might take you a day just for one singular object, like a barrel, if you're texturing in Substance Painter or something like that, and you're doing the full workflow with high poly, etc. So, this workflow is really nice. You can really quickly make a bunch of objects all at once, but that's pretty nice. So now we're going to do the same thing to all these other ones. What I might do is copy over all of these modifiers. So we can do that by clicking this one and then clicking the one that we want to copy from. Control L, and we're going to link the modifier. And from here we can edit the mirror, put our Y back in there. You can see we have our bevels, which is really nice. We're going to do the same thing to essentially all of our wood pieces, because I'm going to add bevels to all of these. So let's just go on ahead and abuse all of this. All right, so we have everything. Another thing I also learned is that we can select all of this and we can hit auto smooth, click on it, and then I think we can right click on it and we can do copy to selected. So now all of them are going to be like that. We can right click on the 180 and then copy to selected, hit shade smooth, and now you can see that they're actually being smooth. Oh, this one didn't get the bevel. Let's quickly modify that one, remove that, and there you go. Now everything has nice smooth edges. Some people would call this micro bevels, which generally you don't want to do too much of, but just to make it so the player can see these details, I'm going to increase the amount a little bit more. Now in the actual reference, they have some really sharp edges. This is like a different style, but I'm not going to go for that. I kind of wanted to show you guys weighted normals, so we're going to go for kind of like this kind of style. And that's it. That is the wardrobe. And you basically just do the same workflow to the barrel and the chair. That's basically it. You do the exact same workflow going from each one to each one. All right, something I forgot to do on these barrels is I forgot to add these little screws in that I was planning on having in here. So I'm gonna go on ahead and really quickly just slap some little nails in. They're gonna be very simple. It's just kind of like cylinders. All right, so I've essentially finished adding all of the smoothing groups and sharpened edges and the weighted normals and all this kind of fun stuff to all of the elements. I did add some edge bevel weights, and essentially that allows you to control where beveling happens. All you have to do is set the limit method to weight, and it's pretty easy. You just go Control E, edge bevel weight, and you set it to 1. And if you don't like where it is, then you just do -1, and then it removes it from where it's at. And so that's basically it. We essentially have everything we need done and ready to go for UV unwrapping. And now, one thing we do need to do is maybe start setting up some different materials, because each one of these does have some different materials. The chair is all the same thing. It's all wood. So all we need to do is create a new material, call it wood. That's it. We'll define the planks over here, and then the metal bits, we're going to add a new one called metal. That's basically it. So now we have separate material IDs. That way, when we change the materials in Unreal, they're all going to have their own little thing. And that's basically it. So now comes UVing. And I do a really quick UVing method, and there might be a little bit of fine tuning and little touches that we're gonna have to do, but generally it's really easy. So I'm gonna go to the top here and you'll see this little extendo thing. We're gonna right click on it and do vertical split. This is just out of personal preference. I like to have my UV editor on the left here, and we're gonna set the window to UV editor. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna do a quick and dirty unwrap of this. I'm going to do a cube projection. Before I do that though, I'm going to apply some of these mirrors. Now, something that could be good or smart to do is perhaps creating a separate file. That way you have a backup, but I'm not going to do that. We're just going to apply this. So now we have an applied mirror. That way these are 2 different pieces. They have different wood. It's not going to look weird, the fact that they're all following the same thing. So first we're going to do a quick and dirty UV unwrap, and then we're going to edit it after we've put it into UE4 or Unreal Engine 5, sorry, we're using UE5. Once I put it in UE5, then I'm gonna see which direction the wood fibers are. And that's really important because we want our wood fibers to go in the direction of whichever direction's, I guess, long. I think that's generally how wood works. That's what I've noticed. I don't know if that's actually true or not, but I think that's how it goes, is you generally have the longest piece being the direction of the fibers. So for here, for example, we'd have up to down would be the direction of the fibers, not going left to right. That would look really weird. That's one thing that I think will make your models look a lot more accurate and a lot more realistic, is the fact that they're going in the right direction. So all we have to do is select everything, and we're going to do a cube projection. That's it. Now, it might look extremely ugly, but because of the fact that we're using a tileable texture and stuff like that, and we're not doing something with Substance Painter, this can have overlaps. It is perfectly fine for it to have overlaps. Of course, once you start getting into light maps, you might have to fix this up a little bit, make adjustments, make a different UV layer and stuff, or UV map layer, and then kind of go from there. But this is essentially what we need just to start with. You are going to notice that all of these are combined into one thing, especially like the door. This is going to be incorrect, but we're just going to import it into Unreal so I can show you what it looks like and then show you the edited version. That way you have a bit of an idea of what we're basically doing here. The idea is these pieces would be their own little pieces. We're going to do some edits with the UVs to work on that. So those are the little manual things, but honestly, if you're not doing any crazy wood fiber stuff, cube projection is all you really need. It is like a lifesaver. It is really nice, but let's go on ahead and continue on the other pieces. Now, the barrel, same thing. We're gonna do the same thing over here. Select everything, and we're gonna do a cube projection over here again. And then the chair, same thing, go in here, cube projection. I am going to remove some of the mirrors though. I don't want this effect where it's like a butterfly almost. I don't know what the actual terminology for it, but there's this effect if you have it mirrored where it's going to look the same, and we don't want that, especially for an asset like this where we're not creating its own special unique texture. There's more the reason to kind of break away from these little weird mirroring issues. In some objects where you're actually texturing it, it would make sense because then you're saving UV space, but in this scenario, it makes more sense to do that. All right. So now we have the UV'd, we have the weighted normals, we have everything ready. The next part is we are going to use a plugin called Blender for Unreal Engine. I'm going to put a link to it down below. It is extremely handy when it comes to exporting assets that are all in one scene. You don't have to go in here and move all these to 0 and then export it. Using default exporter here in Blender, that unfortunately is an issue where it's going to export it in a different way. I think there is a new setting in the newest version of Blender that you can actually change and it'll do it for you. But I just use this plugin. There's a lot of really nice things in here, even collision-based things as well. If you have separate pieces and they're all supposed to be to one object, what you can do is you can select everything, have the main piece here, and what we're going to do is do Control P and set parent to. And now we have it set to this little seating section. And now what we can do is we can set this to export recursive. This basically tells the plugin, hey, this is the main piece of this object. Whatever the name of this is going to be. So if we call it chair, for example, which is going to rename it here, it's also going to export it as chair once we do a bulk export. So I'm going to do that to all of these. I'm going to set up the static mesh as S underscore over here. And then I do have a default export. If I have this as // it's essentially going to export it wherever the blend file is, and that makes it a little easier for me. Export filters, turn everything off in here because we don't need it. And then we're going to do only selection. Doesn't really matter because I don't have my mannequin as an export, but I like to do it anyways, just in case. But that's about it. So then you copy, you do the same process for everything else in here, and you'll be good to go. All right, that's it. You can see that the scene collection here actually looks a little cleaner now because everything is parented underneath these objects, which is quite handy actually. And when we move these around, okay, obviously this one's a little screwy because there's the empty here, but they all basically stay together, which is really cool. This one, I do have to be very careful. This one, the origin is not in the spot that I want it. Where I want it is I technically, because I built this already at the 0, 0, I actually want it at the 0, 0. So one thing to note is whichever is the parent, it's going to set this to 0, 0. Essentially, it's going to set it to here. That's not, that's not good. So I'm going to set my cursor to 0. I'm going to hit W and then set origin to the 3D cursor. And now you can see when we export this, it's going to set it properly to where we want it, which is right in the middle bottom. The barrel, we probably want the middle bottom as well. Luckily, we already have it set to there. And then the chair, middle bottom as well. These are all kind of objects that would be set to the middle bottom. None of them are like modular. They're not going to be, you know, attached together and stuff. For the barrel, actually, I'm actually going to do that differently. I'm going to set the barrel to the center. That way, when we slap it in the world, we can easily just rotate it, make it upside down. That way we have a bit more variety. So that's pretty good. So now we have some different instances here. So all you have to do here is go to Unreal Engine. We're going to select all three of these, export, and we're going to export it. And that's basically it. Now we're going to go to our folder. We can right click on the folder here, open location externally, and it's going to show us all of our files with the prefix that we specified, which was s underscore. That's it. All we got to do now is import it into Unreal and slap some materials on it, and then do some finishing touches to the wood fibers in their directions, and we're in business. All right, we've made our way to Unreal Engine. We're now just gonna go on ahead and drag all of these in here. We're gonna generate missing collisions, make sure Combine Meshes is turned on. And if you don't see this, it's under Advanced, of course. And let's see here. We don't want to import any materials. We don't want any of that. We're basically good to go. We're going to import all of these and we should be in business. Looks like we are. I am going to probably use the starter content materials, but if you don't have them, you can easily add the starter content, or you can just use your own materials. Now that we have that, let's go on ahead and see how these objects are looking. As you can see, they're properly at 0, 0, 0, and they look pretty good. Ignore the sword. Look at these props. They look exactly as they should. We got to start adding in some materials. So let's go on ahead and slap some materials onto these. This one has wood and metal. So we're going to go on ahead and look at the different ones that we have here. We have wood oak. Oh, as you can tell, it's going in the wrong direction. So this is one of those instances where we're going to have to fix the direction of the fibers. It'll be pretty easy. We'll probably just adjust the UVs a bit. I'm kind of liking wood pine. Wood oak is not so bad, but I'm not a big fan of the color. So for now, I'm just going to stick with wood pine. I don't want to make enormous edits to things just yet. For the metal, we're going to do, I guess, metal steel. The main issue with this is just the fact that all of the UVs are incorrect. Additionally, we also are going to have to apply the array. Because we want all the fibers to go in different directions. So we have a couple things we need to fix there. Super, super easy. I kind of wanted to show you what it would look like if we don't specifically take the time to fix the fibers. I think this one, you'll be able to see a little bit more what I mean, focusing on the directions of the wood fibers. I think it makes a gigantic difference. So you can see here, these are technically going to the left and right, but that's incorrect. We want them to go up and down. So those are little things that we'll fix up. I'm also noticing a little bit of Z fighting there, so I might have duplicated an object or given it a mirror. So little things like that will fix, but you know, that's the process. It's kind of the first import, you have a few issues, and then the second one is where you really start modifying and getting things in the direction that you want it to be. Apply our beautiful pine. We'll just do the same to here for now. Look at that. Pretty quick, easy. Of course, the details do take a little bit more time, but you know, your modeling software can't really figure out the direction of the fibers, unfortunately, unless there was a plugin for that, which would actually be pretty fantastic. So we're going to quickly go back to our modeling software, and we're going to make our necessary edits that we need to make here. Removing that mirror modifier, we're going to apply the array on this piece, do a cube projection again. Now that we know that the wood fibers on the textures go left to right, we can easily just go in here and rotate it by 90. Now it's going in the right direction. So that piece is good. We also noticed right here, the wood fibers going in the wrong direction. We also need to fix these over here. So all these little edits really make it go a long way. So here we can see that they're going the wrong way. We're going to rotate it by 90. This back piece, also wrong direction, rotated by 90. How's the top piece looking? Top piece is actually correct. So this is what we want. This is what we don't want. Tiny pieces, again, same problem. Rotate that by 90. These are a little bit of a more unique situation because they're a little bit more detailed. What we're going to want to do here, I suppose, is essentially add some marked seams. So for those that were curious about some UVing tricks and whatnot, here we go. We're going to do a little bit of marked seams here. Since this is all one wood piece, I think we should be okay with the seams being a little different. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to take that piece. I'm going to unwrap it. I'm actually going to keep the cube unwrapped, otherwise we're going to have some issues. So this piece rotated by 90, this piece rotated by 90. Generally, we want the longest piece to be in the other direction. This piece is already working. That's great. I'm going to move it down a bit though. This piece also correct, which is very nice. Now the top doors. This one's a bit of a different story. Top door, this piece. These are the back pieces. We technically don't need the back pieces, but I'll keep it just in case. Rotate it. The inside pieces, rotate it. Of course, we're going to check out this again. Those are correct. Let's take a look at that one. Yep. This one, no. So we're going to select all of these. Rotate that. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to move it. The reasoning for that is it kind of randomizes the fibers a little bit because I did notice they're right next to each other. So by doing that, we kind of randomize how they look. That way they're not all connected. It should look a lot better. So with those edits now, we can quickly export this one piece. We can go back to Unreal, right click, re-import, super quick workflow. Super quick. And now we can take a quick look at it and we can see that all of the fibers are essentially going in the directions that we want it to. Of course, you'll probably notice here and there when things are not in the direction that you want it, but that's looking pretty good. Like you can already see that that is almost like a finished asset. You don't really need much more than that, to be honest. There are details that you can add in like dirt and whatnot. And like I stated at the beginning of the video, having some materials and shaders that you already have set up can definitely accomplish that, but I'm not going to cover that in this video because that would probably make it a little longer. Here's one of these moments though where a mirror makes it look really weird. I'm not a big fan of the fact that this wooden piece is mirrored and all of them kind of follow the same thing. You can see that this is mirrored and that looks a bit weird. So those are some little instances where I would probably recommend taking those pieces and removing the mirror or applying it and then re-UVing it, and it would look a lot better. So now let's fix up the chair and the barrel. Let's go ahead and fix the chair. I want the fibers of this piece to probably go in the other direction because that's the longest section. These, again, other direction. These over here are, I think, already going in the right direction. Nice. These pieces, same thing, like that. These right here, I am noticing one of the pieces are going in the wrong direction. Looks about right, so we're gonna go on ahead and export these two, re-import the barrel and the chair, and let's see how this is looking. So I'm happy with this, but like I said, the fibers on the barrel kind of seem to, I guess, perfect, right? So what I'm gonna do for that is I'm gonna randomize their locations a little bit. So I'm gonna select a few of these, or I guess I'll select every other, and we are going to, I guess, offset it a little bit. And then let's go ahead and re-export it, re-import it, and look at that. Looks pretty good. All the wood fibers are a little bit different from each other, and it looks like a barrel. The chair looks pretty good as well. All the fibers are going in the right direction. These little details, I think, really go a long way in terms of making your assets look good. But these are all using the exact same 3 materials. And then once you make variations of your materials, you can have things like oak, walnut, etc. And that's essentially the entire workflow. It's that easy. That's about it. Now, this video might have been a bit longer than I anticipated, but we made 3 props in, I don't know, an hour, 2 hours, which, you know, if you were to go through the entire process of Substance Painter, etc., that would probably take you maybe a full work day, a little bit more than half, depending on your speed, of course. And then, of course, on top of that, you have to deal with optimization, stuff like that, etc., etc. If you really wanted to add dirt details and stuff like that, you could definitely do that. If you want me to cover that, I can do it up. I can get it figured out and then make a video for you guys. But for now, I think I'm gonna call it done. I'm pretty happy with how this came out. If you have any questions, feedback, etc., on how this maybe could be sped up or even better, feel free to write a comment. I'll pin it or something, and then we'll kind of go from there. Other than that, like and subscribe. I also have started a coffee page. If you are interested, I've started a coffee page. I'll put a link down below. If you want to support me in my endeavors of doing YouTube, I also set a goal for $500. I know over a long time span. I don't think this will be instantly, but a little goal to start a little game dev series of tutorials or just things Blender wise and whatnot. So other than that, I hope this helped you. Have a good one.